The story of the Great Flood is one of the most enigmatic and debated narratives in human history. It is not merely a biblical account, but a story echoed in various ancient civilizations worldwide, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to indigenous traditions. But what truly transpired before the flood? What kind of world existed before this divine judgment? And why did it reach a point where complete annihilation was deemed necessary? According to scripture and ancient Jewish texts, this was a time of extraordinary lifespans, advanced knowledge and supernatural beings. Yet it was also an era of corruption, where fallen angels walked among men, forbidden knowledge was spread, and the Nephilim, giant offspring of divine and human unions, roamed the earth. This world was not just lost to time, it was deliberately erased. Many details of this forgotten era are hidden in apocryphal writings, offering a glimpse into a civilization that defied the divine order. What wisdom was drowned beneath the waves? What warnings does this ancient destruction hold for us today? Join us as we unravel the mysteries of the pre-flood world, its sins, its secrets, and its downfall. If you find this fascinating, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's step back in time to uncover the origins of humanity and the forces that led to its near extinction. The origins of humanity and the lineages of Cain and Seth. The world before the flood began with Adam and Eve, the first humans created by God. Their children, Cain and Abel, marked the first division of humanity, one devoted to righteousness, the other to rebellion. When Cain murdered Abel out of jealousy, he was cast away, forming a lineage that would drift further from divine principles. Cain's descendants became known for their achievements in craftsmanship, music, and agriculture, but they also embodied moral decay and violence. Among them were Lamech, a man who committed murder and boasted of his violent deeds, and Tubal-Cain, a forger of weapons who contributed to the increasing warfare among men. In contrast, Adam and Eve's third son, Seth, carried forward the spiritual legacy of his father. His descendants remained faithful to God, upholding divine teachings and calling upon his name. Among them was Enoch, a man so righteous that he was taken by God without experiencing death. Enoch, the great-great-grandson of Seth, was known for his deep communion with God and his prophetic warnings against the growing corruption of mankind. His writings, preserved in ancient texts like the Book of Enoch, describe visions of divine judgment, the rebellion of fallen angels, and the sins of humanity. For generations, the Sethites upheld their devotion to God, standing apart from the wickedness of Cain's lineage. However, as time passed, temptation crept in. The sons of God, men from Seth's line, began to take wives from the daughters of men, the descendants of Cain. As these unions grew more frequent, Seth's lineage gradually lost its spiritual distinction. Many abandoned their faith, embracing the ways of Cain's descendants, indulging in idolatry, materialism, and corruption. This marked the beginning of a rapid moral decline, one that would soon spread across the entire world. This intermingling played a crucial role in the widespread moral decay of pre-flood civilization. It was not just the merging of families, but the merging of values, ones that rejected divine law in favor of earthly desires. As this corruption deepened, humanity edged closer to the brink of divine judgment, setting the stage for the chaos and downfall that would soon follow. The corruption of humanity and the intermingling of lineages. Over time, the descendants of Seth, once devoted to righteousness, began to lose their spiritual resolve. As they settled among the rest of humanity, they intermingled with the descendants of Cain, forming unions that merged two opposing ways of life. This blending of lineages, described in Genesis 6, led to a loss of spiritual integrity among Seth's descendants. As they embraced the customs and beliefs of Cain's lineage, they drifted further from God's commandments. This intermingling did more than unite bloodlines. It introduced new values and ideologies that conflicted with divine principles. Idolatry became widespread, greed and selfishness overtook humility, and bloodshed became a common occurrence. The pursuit of power and material wealth overshadowed devotion, while acts of cruelty and injustice spread unchecked. The righteous lineage of Seth no longer stood apart as a beacon of faith. Instead, it became indistinguishable from those who had long abandoned God's ways. As the generations passed, knowledge of God's laws faded, and humanity became consumed by their own desires. Rituals once meant to honor the Creator were corrupted into self-serving practices, and divine wisdom was replaced with human ambition. The once clear distinction between good and evil blurred, and those who still held onto righteousness became a persecuted minority. The decline was not limited to morality. Society itself began to crumble. Communities that had once thrived under principles of justice and cooperation now functioned under dominance and fear. Corrupt leaders sought control through manipulation and brute force, leading to increased oppression and suffering. War and bloodshed became the norm as mankind turned against itself, warring over power, resources, and dominance. The moral decay was not just a social shift. It was a complete departure from the values that once upheld order. Corruption permeated every aspect of society, distorting justice and replacing faith with worldly desires. This degeneration was not a sudden catastrophe, but a gradual erosion of morality, leading humanity further away from its divine purpose. With moral corruption at its peak and the world consumed by violence and perversion, divine patience had reached its limit. The stage was set for a judgment that would cleanse the earth, restoring order and righteousness before humanity could utterly destroy itself. The influence of fallen angels. As human civilization descended into moral decay, another force emerged to accelerate its corruption: the fallen angels, also known as the Watchers. According to ancient texts like the Book of Enoch, these celestial beings were meant to observe humanity, but instead they defied divine order and took an active role in shaping human affairs. Led by a powerful angel named Semjaza, they descended to earth and took human wives, an act of rebellion that resulted in disastrous consequences. Beyond their offspring, the fallen angels themselves introduced forbidden knowledge to mankind. They taught sorcery, weapon-making, astrology, and vanity, leading humans further away from God's path. Azazel, one of their leaders, revealed the secrets of metallurgy, enabling the creation of advanced weapons and armor that fueled endless warfare. Others introduced enchantments, charms, and divination, opening the door to widespread occult practices. This knowledge, while granting humans temporary power, only deepened their depravity and hastened their downfall. Additionally, these celestial beings manipulated human minds, fostering a culture of idolatry and false worship. They presented themselves as deities, demanding veneration and sacrifice, further corrupting human spirituality. The once monotheistic reverence for the Creator became polluted with the worship of false gods, paving the way for even greater rebellion against divine law. The fallen angels also twisted natural order, experimenting with creation in ways that defied God's intended design. Ancient accounts speak of genetic manipulations, unholy unions not only between angels and humans, but also among different creatures, resulting in monstrous hybrids. These unnatural abominations spread fear and devastation, further fueling the moral and physical corruption of the pre-flood world. The influence of the fallen angels was catastrophic. turning what was already a corrupt civilization into one beyond redemption. As their dominion over the earth expanded, the cries of the oppressed reached the heavens. The once thriving world had become a battlefield of chaos and despair. The time for divine judgment was drawing near, and the flood was soon to come, a final act to cleanse the world of its defilement. The birth of the Nephilim. As the fallen angels descended to earth and took human wives, their unions gave rise to a race of beings known as the Nephilim. These half-divine, half-human giants were unlike any creatures that had existed before. Towering over men, they possessed extraordinary strength, intelligence, and an insatiable hunger for power. Their very existence defied the natural order, and their presence only furthered humanity's descent into darkness. The Nephilim were not only warriors, but also rulers, establishing great kingdoms and empires. Ancient accounts suggest that these giants demanded worship, positioning themselves as demigods and demanding human sacrifice. They exploited mankind, ruling through fear and violence, erecting monumental structures as testaments to their dominance. Some traditions even suggest that these beings possessed knowledge of advanced technologies and mystical arts, using them to extend their power. Despite their might, the Nephilim were inherently corrupt. Their influence led to widespread bloodshed, war, and oppression. Their appetites were insatiable, consuming vast resources and even, according to some accounts, turning to cannibalism. The land groaned under their tyranny, and the cries of the oppressed reached the heavens. The Nephilim were not merely brutal overlords, they also sought to alter creation itself. Some ancient texts suggest that they engaged in unnatural experiments, corrupting both human and animal life. This defilement of nature further provoked divine wrath, as it threatened to undo the balance established by God. Creatures of strange form and immense power roamed the land, reinforcing the chaos that had overtaken the world. God, seeing the world overrun by these monstrous beings and the unchecked wickedness of mankind, set forth his plan for judgment. The flood was not only meant to cleanse human sin, but also to eradicate the Nephilim and the perversions they had wrought upon creation. Their extinction would serve as a warning, a reminder of what happens when divine order is defied. Though the flood washed away their reign, legends of the Nephilim persisted long after, influencing myths and historical records across cultures. Some believe remnants of their kind survived, hiding in the shadows of history, waiting for a time to rise again. Advanced knowledge and civilization. The pre-flood world was not only a time of corruption and chaos, but also an era of remarkable advancements. Ancient records suggest that civilizations before the deluge possessed extraordinary knowledge, some of it taught by the fallen angels themselves. This knowledge extended into various fields, including architecture, astronomy, medicine, and metallurgy, allowing humanity to build cities, study the stars, and develop complex societal structures. According to the Book of Enoch and other ancient texts, the fallen angels introduced humans to advanced sciences and mystical arts. They taught metallurgy, leading to the creation of weapons and armor which fueled endless wars. They revealed the secrets of herbal medicine and the use of intoxicating substances, altering human consciousness. They also imparted knowledge of astrology and divination, steering humanity away from divine worship and into the realm of occult practices. The remnants of these great civilizations can be seen in mysterious structures scattered across the world, monuments whose construction still baffles modern engineers. From the megalithic temples of Malta to the pyramids of Egypt, many ancient wonders hint at lost knowledge far beyond what conventional history acknowledges. Some speculate that these societies harnessed energy sources or technologies that were ultimately lost after the flood, buried beneath time and water. Despite their advancements, these civilizations were ultimately doomed by their own hubris. The pursuit of forbidden knowledge led to arrogance, and rather than using their discoveries for good, mankind turned them into tools of domination, excess, and defiance against divine will. As the world grew darker, its accomplishments became a double-edged sword, both a testament to human ingenuity and a symbol of its downfall. Seeing the irreversible corruption and misuse of knowledge, God determined that humanity's path had led to an unavoidable reckoning. The Great Flood would wash away not just the wickedness, but also the knowledge that had led mankind astray. What little remained of these ancient advancements would be remembered only in myth and legend, leaving future generations to wonder about the true capabilities of the pre-flood world. The mystical elements of the pre-flood world. As the pre-flood world spiraled into corruption, remnants of its early divine order still lingered, shaping the lives of those who walked the earth. It is believed that the first humans spoke a sacred and perfect language, often referred to as the Adamic tongue. This divine form of communication, said to have been given to Adam by God, allowed for a direct and unbroken connection with the Creator. It was a language of purity and power, unlike the fractured dialects that would emerge later. However, as generations passed and humanity's pride grew, this sacred language was lost after the Tower of Babel incident, when divine intervention scattered mankind and confounded their speech. The Tower of Babel, as described in Genesis 11, was a monumental structure built by the descendants of Noah in their attempt to reach the heavens and establish their own authority apart from God. Their ambition reflected not only human pride, but also a desire for self-sufficiency, defying divine order. In response, God intervened by confusing their language, preventing them from understanding one another. This sudden linguistic division forced people to disperse across the earth, leading to the formation of different nations and cultures. The Adamic tongue, once a universal language, was lost in the aftermath of this divine judgment. Life before the flood was also marked by extraordinary longevity, with figures like Methuselah recorded as living for 969 years. Various theories attempt to explain this phenomenon. Some attribute it to divine blessing, granting the early generations of humanity the strength to thrive, while others suggest environmental conditions, such as a protective atmospheric layer, played a role in extending lifespans. But as sin spread and the flood loomed, human longevity saw a steep decline. After the deluge, lifespans gradually shortened, bringing humanity closer to the mortal limitations we recognize today. Amidst this world of long-lived men and divine communication, there also roamed creatures of immense power, spoken of in biblical and ancient texts. Beings such as Leviathan and Behemoth are described as colossal and fearsome, their presence striking terror into those who encountered them. Some scholars speculate that these creatures were remnants of a bygone age, possibly linked to prehistoric beasts or entities corrupted by the fallen angels. Their destruction in the flood symbolized the eradication of chaos, a necessary step toward restoring divine order. But even more sinister than the creatures that roamed the earth were the spiritual transgressions that took hold of humanity. As people drifted further from divine truth, they embraced forbidden knowledge, delving into dark arts imparted by the fallen angels. Necromancy, divination, and sorcery became widespread as men sought power through supernatural means rather than through faith. The Watchers, having defied divine decree, introduced these practices, spreading spells, omens, and rituals that further tainted human civilization. This spiritual corruption only deepened mankind's moral decay, hastening the need for divine judgment. The pre-flood world was a time of both lost wonders and unspeakable transgressions, a reality vastly different from our own, yet filled with echoes that linger in myth and scripture. As this era reached its breaking point, it became clear that humanity had strayed too far from its creator. The flood was not just a punishment, but a necessary cleansing, washing away not only physical corruption, but the spiritual defilement that had overtaken the world. The warnings of that time remain etched in ancient records, a lesson for future generations about the dangers of forsaking divine order. The judgment of God and the prophecy of Enoch. As the corruption of the pre-flood world deepened, one man stood as a beacon of righteousness, Enoch, the great-great-grandson of Adam through the line of Seth. Unlike those around him, Enoch remained faithful to God, walking in divine wisdom and receiving revelations about the fate of humanity. His prophecies warned of impending judgment, a divine reckoning that would wipe away the wickedness engulfing the earth. The Book of Enoch details visions of celestial realms, the rebellion of the fallen angels, and the inevitable wrath of God. Enoch foresaw the great flood, a cataclysm sent not just to cleanse the earth of human sin, but to rid creation of the Nephilim and the corrupting influence of forbidden knowledge. He prophesied that only a remnant would be spared, those who remained faithful and obedient to divine law. Enoch's teachings did not go unnoticed. According to ancient accounts, he confronted the leaders of the fallen angels, warning them of their impending doom. His pleas for repentance were ignored, and the Watchers, along with their offspring, continued their reign of terror. Seeing no other way to restore balance, God declared an irreversible judgment. God, seeing that humanity had strayed too far, chose Noah, a righteous man from the line of Seth, to preserve life and ensure the continuation of his covenant. Noah was instructed to build an ark, a vessel that would withstand the coming deluge. Despite ridicule from those who had abandoned God's ways, Noah remained steadfast, heeding divine instruction as Enoch had foretold. Before his mysterious departure from the earth, Enoch imparted his wisdom to Methuselah, his son, and Lamech, Noah's father. Some traditions suggest that Enoch was taken up to heaven so that he would not witness the coming destruction, a sign of divine favor for his unwavering righteousness. His departure served as a final warning that the time of judgment was near. Enoch's prophecy was not just a warning of destruction, but also a testament to God's mercy and justice. It signified that despite humanity's descent into darkness, there was always an opportunity for redemption. His teachings, though largely forgotten after the flood, left a lasting imprint on biblical tradition, reminding future generations of the consequences of turning away from the Creator. The catastrophe of the flood. As humanity reached the pinnacle of corruption, violence and defiance against divine order, the inevitable judgment arrived. The flood was not merely an act of destruction, but a divine reset, purging the earth of its wickedness and restoring the balance that had been lost. God, in his infinite wisdom, chose Noah, a man found righteous in his generation, to be the harbinger of salvation for the remnant of creation. Noah, having received divine instructions, set to work building the ark, a massive vessel designed to withstand the cataclysmic waters that would soon engulf the world. Despite his warnings and tireless efforts, the people around him scoffed, blinded by their own depravity and disbelief. They continued in their indulgences, unaware that their final days were upon them. According to some traditions, Noah took decades to construct the ark, during which time he pleaded with the people to repent, yet his words fell on deaf ears. When the time of judgment came, the skies opened, and torrents of rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. The fountains of the deep burst forth, unleashing forces beyond human comprehension. Some interpretations suggest that this event was not merely heavy rainfall, but a cataclysmic rupture of subterranean waters, an upheaval of the Earth's foundations. The rising waters consumed cities, forests, and mountains, washing away the remnants of the pre-flood civilization. The Nephilim, the corrupted beings spawned from the union of fallen angels and humans, perished in the deluge, their reign of terror brought to a sudden and absolute end. As the floodwaters raged, chaos overtook the land. Survivors outside the ark fought desperately to escape the rising tide, seeking refuge on mountaintops and in caves, but there was no salvation outside God's ordained plan. Legends speak of the final cries of those swept away, a harrowing reminder of divine judgment and humanity's fall from grace. Meanwhile, Noah and his family, sheltered within the ark, endured the tumultuous storm, their faith sustaining them through the devastation. For over a year, Noah, his family, and the preserved creatures remained on the ark, adrift in a world that had been entirely transformed. The waters covered the earth for 150 days before they began to recede. When the floodwaters finally diminished, the ark came to rest upon Mount Ararat, marking the beginning of a new chapter in human history. Noah's descendants would go on to repopulate the earth, carrying with them the memory of divine judgment and the responsibility to walk in righteousness. The covenant God established with Noah, symbolized by the rainbow, was a promise that such a catastrophe would never again befall the earth in such a manner. The flood was more than a historical event. It was a turning point, a lesson etched into the consciousness of all future generations. It served as a testament to both divine justice and mercy, reminding humanity that while corruption may spread, the Creator always provides a path to redemption for those who seek it. The echoes of this event remain in the myths and traditions of countless cultures, all bearing witness to a time when the world was reborn through the waters of judgment. The Great Flood was more than a moment of divine judgment. It was a transformation that reshaped the course of human history. As the waters receded and Noah's family stepped onto dry land, they found themselves in a world that had been utterly cleansed of the old corrupt ways. The silence that followed the storm must have been deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just consumed the earth. It was a new beginning, yet the scars of the past remained as a solemn reminder of the consequences of unchecked wickedness and defiance against divine order. Noah, in obedience to God's command, built an altar and offered sacrifices in gratitude for their survival. In response, God established a covenant with humanity, symbolized by the appearance of a rainbow, a divine promise that never again would the earth be destroyed by floodwaters. Yet within this promise was also a warning that humanity must learn from its past mistakes and walk in righteousness, lest it once again invite divine correction. Despite this fresh start, the descendants of Noah would eventually fall into familiar patterns of arrogance and rebellion. The Tower of Babel, the rise of corrupt nations, and the dominance of empires all echoed the sins of the pre-flood world. Human nature, it seemed, was stubbornly resistant to change. Yet, through it all, God's mercy persisted, offering paths to redemption for those willing to seek Him. The flood narrative stands as both an eternal warning and a message of hope. Judgment is real, but so is renewal. The echoes of the flood are found in myths and traditions across cultures, all bearing witness to a time when the world was purged and reborn. The lessons of Noah's time remain relevant today, calling humanity to reflect on its own moral standing and to choose a path that aligns with divine will rather than self-destruction. History has shown us that civilizations rise and fall, often following the same patterns of arrogance and moral decay. But just as Noah and his family were preserved through obedience and faith, so too can individuals and societies find salvation through righteousness. The flood was not the end. It was a reset, a second chance for humanity to build upon the foundation of divine truth. The choice to heed its lessons is one that each generation must make for itself. What are your thoughts on the significance of the Great Flood? Do you see parallels in today's world? Share your reflections in the comments below, and if you found this discussion insightful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into biblical history and ancient mysteries. Yet one must ask, were the giants truly wiped from existence after the Great Flood? Whispers from the past suggest otherwise. And among those whispers, one name resounds with unsettling clarity: Goliath of Gath. The story of Goliath and David. The battlefield stretched across the valley of Elah, dry and cracked under the scorching sun. On one side stood the army of Israel, their ranks tense, hands gripping their weapons with uncertainty. On the other, the Philistines, roaring with confidence. And at the center of it all, towering above every man in sight, was Goliath of Gath. He was a monster of a man. According to 1 Samuel 17:4-7, he stood 6 cubits and a span, nearly 10 feet tall. His body was encased in a bronze coat of mail, weighing over 5,000 shekels, about 125 pounds. His legs were covered in thick bronze greaves, and a massive javelin rested across his back. In his right hand, he carried a spear so large that its iron tip alone weighed 600 shekels, nearly 15 pounds. The shaft was like a weaver's beam, thick as a man's arm. Standing before him was his shield-bearer, dwarfed by the giant's size. For 40 days, every morning and evening, Goliath stepped forward, his booming voice shaking the valley. "Why do you line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man to fight me. If he can kill me, we will be your servants, but if I kill him, you will serve us." 1 Samuel 17:8-9. His challenge echoed across the valley, striking fear into the hearts of the Israelites. No one dared to answer. Even King Saul, Israel's mightiest warrior, refused to step forward. Then, on the 41st day, something changed. David, a young shepherd, arrived at the camp to deliver food to his brothers. He had never been trained as a soldier, had never worn armor, had never wielded a sword. And yet, when he heard Goliath's taunts, something ignited within him. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? 1 Samuel 17:26. His words spread through the camp, reaching the ears of King Saul. Summoned before the king, David made a bold declaration: "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17:32. Saul hesitated, looking at the boy standing before him. He was young, unarmored, untrained, but David was determined. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17:37. Saul relented, offering David his own royal armor. But as the boy struggled under the weight, he removed it. He would not fight with steel and bronze. He would fight with faith. He walked to the brook, running through the valley, kneeling beside the cool water. His fingers searched the stones, picking out 5 smooth ones. Then, gripping his sling, he turned to face Goliath. The giant laughed. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" 1 Samuel 17:43. David did not flinch. His voice rang out, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. Today, The Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head." 1 Samuel 17:45-46. Goliath roared in fury, slamming his spear into the earth, then charged forward. His massive legs pounded the ground, his armor glinting in the sunlight. David did not wait. He reached into his pouch, pulled out a stone, and placed it into his sling. He began to spin it, the leather straps whirling faster and faster, the air humming around him. Then, release. The stone cut through the air like lightning, slamming into Goliath's forehead with a sickening crack. His roar of fury became a gasp of shock. The giant staggered, his knees buckling. Then, before the Philistine army, before the Israelites, before the world, Goliath fell. David rushed forward. He climbed onto the giant's massive chest, gripped the hilt of Goliath's own enormous sword, and with one powerful stroke, severed his head. The Philistine army screamed in horror and turned to flee. The Israelites, emboldened by the impossible victory, pursued them in triumph. The great Goliath of Gath, the terror of Israel, was dead. But the story didn't end here. The brothers of Goliath's death was a turning point. But it was not the end of the story, because Goliath was not alone. He was not the last of his kind. His fall may have signified Israel's triumph over the Philistines, but it did not erase the lingering presence of giants from the biblical narrative. The Bible reveals that Goliath had brothers, other warriors of immense size and strength, each meeting their fate at the hands of David's men. This suggests that Goliath was not a lone anomaly, but rather a member of an enduring bloodline of giants, one that had survived for generations despite the catastrophic events of ancient history. 2. Samuel 21:15-22 recounts the battles against these giants, revealing at least 4 other warriors of colossal stature. Ishbi-Benob, armed with a spear whose bronze head alone weighed hundreds of shekels, he sought to kill King David, but was slain by Abishai. Saph, a fearsome giant who fell to Sibbecai the Hushathite, a nameless warrior, a giant with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, defeated by Jonathan, the nephew of David. Lami, described as Goliath's brother, he was struck down by Elhanan. These were not myths or exaggerations. The biblical record treats these battles as historical events, not allegory or legend. If Goliath was merely an abnormally large man, why were there others like him, all hailing from the same lineage? Why was Gath, the city of Goliath, home to a known race of giants? The Philistines were fierce warriors, yet they were never known for producing giants. And yet, in Gath, they were not only present, but feared. Could this be an anomaly of nature, or was there something more to their bloodline? Some scholars propose that these giants were not purely Philistine, but rather remnants of an older, nearly extinct race, one with roots stretching back to a time before the flood of Noah. The Book of Numbers, 1332-33, provides another clue regarding the persistence of giants. When Moses sent spies to scout the land of Canaan, they returned with a terrifying report. The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. The Anakim, mentioned in this passage, were direct descendants of the Nephilim, their immense size and power striking fear into all who beheld them. So who were these Nephilim mentioned in the scriptures? The answer can be found in the book of Genesis and the book of Enoch, which provide deeper insights into the origins and fate of these ancient giants. Is Goliath a Nephilim? The Bible speaks of a race of giants known as the Nephilim, beings of immense strength and stature, said to be the offspring of fallen angels and human women. Their origins are described in Genesis 6:1-4. When men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. These were not ordinary humans. They were feared as supernatural warriors, possessing abilities beyond human limits. A key enigma in this passage is the phrase, the sons of God. Who exactly were they? The traditional interpretation suggests they were fallen angels, but some argue they could have been ancient rulers or another group of divine beings. The Book of Enoch, a non-canonical text that expands upon the Nephilim's origins, provides a darker explanation. According to Enoch, 1 Enoch 6 through 7, a group of 200 fallen angels, known as the Watchers, descended upon Mount Hermon, taking human women as their wives. These unions produced the Nephilim, giants of terrifying strength and brutality. The book describes how these giants ravaged the earth, consuming everything in sight, even turning to cannibalism when food became scarce. They were so powerful and so corrupt that the entire earth became unlivable under their rule. Their actions were so horrifying that even the fallen angels who'd created them could not control them. This is what ultimately led to God's decision to send the flood, not just to punish humanity for its wickedness, but to cleanse the earth of these abominations. But if the flood wiped them out, how did giants like Goliath and his brothers appear centuries later? One theory suggests that the Watchers' influence never truly disappeared, that after the flood, their spirits continued to roam the earth, corrupting new generations. Some believe this could explain the presence of the Rephaim, a race of giants mentioned throughout the Old Testament, feared for their incredible size and power. These beings were associated with ancient warrior clans and were considered nearly unstoppable in battle. The Book of Jubilees, another ancient text, also speaks of Nephilim blood persisting beyond the flood. It describes how some of the Nephilim spirits became demons, wandering the earth, while their physical descendants still roamed among men. Some interpretations suggest that these lingering bloodlines were responsible for the emergence of later giants, such as those seen in Canaan and Philistine territories. If Goliath was indeed a descendant of the Nephilim, then history must be rewritten. It would mean that the influence of the fallen angels, the Watchers, never truly disappeared. Their legacy, whether through corrupted bloodlines or lingering spiritual forces, might still be shaping the world in ways we have yet to understand. If the stories of Goliath and his brothers weren't enough to convince you of the return of the Nephilim after the Great Flood, then the next section will delve into pagan folklore to see if the Nephilim existed beyond the Bible. Nephilims in pagan stories. In ancient Greece, the Titans were described as massive, godlike beings who ruled before being overthrown by the Olympians. They were said to be primordial, predating the gods, just as the Nephilim existed before and after the flood. Even more disturbingly, the Gigantes, another race of giants, waged war against the heavens in the Gigantomachy, mirroring the rebellion of the Nephilim and the Watchers. Were these myths mere inventions, or were they pagan retellings of the true battle between heaven and the corrupted earth? The same pattern appears in Mesopotamian traditions. The Anunnaki, celestial beings who descended to rule over humanity, bear striking similarities to the Watchers in the Book of Enoch. Some accounts even describe them as massive, semi-divine rulers, echoing the Nephilim. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest recorded myths, describes its hero as a giant, part human and part divine, much like the Nephilim, and his story even contains a great flood, further connecting these legends to biblical history. In the Norse traditions, the Jötun were chaotic giants, enemies of the gods, destined to wage war at the end of time. This mirrors the biblical concept of the Nephilim as destroyers of order, leading humanity into darkness. Even in Hindu mythology, the Rakshasas, shape-shifting giants known for their strength and cruelty, serve as another reflection of the same ancient story. Legends of giants exist even in the Americas. The Paiute people tell of the Si-Te-Ka, red-haired giants who terrorized their ancestors before being wiped out. The Aztecs and Mayans also spoke of a race of giants who ruled before the current age of man, only to be destroyed by, guess what? A great flood. These global accounts follow the same pattern. Giants emerge, they spread destruction, and they are eventually wiped out, just as the Bible describes. The uncanny similarities between these myths cannot be ignored. Every civilization remembers a time when giants walked the earth, beings who were stronger, taller, and more powerful than ordinary men. Many were said to be the offspring of divine beings and humans, just as Genesis describes the Nephilim as the children of the sons of God and the daughters of men. From a Catholic perspective, these myths are not independent stories, nor are they separate histories of different races of giants. They're corrupted, pagan retellings of the truth found in Scripture, a truth passed down imperfectly through oral traditions and distorted by idol-worshipping cultures. While different civilizations ascribe these giants to their own pantheons and false gods, their existence ultimately confirms what the Bible has said all along. There were giants in those days, and their presence shaped the ancient world. But if these giants were real, could traces of them still exist today? Legends and myths may tell their stories, but what about modern evidence? Are there real-world accounts, sightings, or even physical remains that suggest the Nephilim didn't just belong to the ancient past, but might still walk among us? The modern footprints of the Nephilims. One of the most controversial encounters between the Nephilim and modern humans is the Kandahar giant, an alleged confrontation between US soldiers and a massive red-haired humanoid in Afghanistan in 2002. According to accounts from supposed military personnel, a special operations unit was on patrol in a remote mountainous region when they stumbled upon a cave entrance surrounded by scattered human bones. Before they could investigate further, a 12-foot-tall creature with fiery red hair and an enormous muscular frame allegedly emerged from the cave, wielding a massive spear. The soldiers opened fire, but the creature moved with unnatural speed, displaying strength far beyond any normal human. It allegedly killed one of the soldiers with a single strike, impaling him before the rest of the team unleashed continuous gunfire. After nearly 30 seconds of concentrated fire, the giant finally collapsed. Soon after, a military helicopter was called in to retrieve the body, which was said to weigh over 1,100 pounds, 500 kilograms. Witnesses claimed the body was flown to a secretive base, and all records of the encounter were erased from official reports. Despite the chilling details, the Kandahar giant case remains unconfirmed, with no verifiable evidence or official acknowledgement from the US military. However, multiple sources, including alleged soldiers and intelligence operatives, have come forward over the years, recounting similar versions of the event. Some speculate that this creature could have been a surviving Nephilim, hidden deep in the mountains for centuries, while others believe it was part of an undiscovered species of humanoid giants. Beyond the Kandahar incident, there have also been physical discoveries that raise serious questions. Over the last century, massive human skeletons have allegedly been uncovered worldwide. Reports from the late 19th and early 20th centuries describe 10 to 15-foot skeletons found in North America, often in ancient burial mounds. Some of these discoveries were even published in newspapers, but many of the remains mysteriously disappeared, leading to speculation that institutions like the Smithsonian Institution suppressed the evidence. In 2013, researchers in Ecuador unearthed a giant human femur, suggesting a person at least 7 to 9 feet tall. Similarly, in 2018, a team in Bulgaria discovered what appeared to be a human skeleton of extreme size buried in ancient ruins. Scientists attributed some cases to gigantism, but could such a high concentration of remains indicate something more? DNA analysis has also produced unexpected results. In Peru, elongated skulls, far larger than any known human deformity, were tested, revealing mitochondrial DNA with unknown origins. While some claim these could be evidence of genetic anomalies, others speculate they might be remnants of an ancient non-human species. Despite the growing number of discoveries, official explanations remain vague, and skeptics often dismiss them as hoaxes or misinterpretations. There is an undeniable truth that if the Nephilim do exist, it would be one of the greatest confirmations of our faith. Would it not serve as a powerful testament that the scriptures have always spoken the truth? For centuries, skeptics have dismissed biblical accounts as mythology or exaggerated folklore. Yet the existence of the Nephilim, whether in ancient times or in hidden corners of the modern world, would provide undeniable proof that the events described in Genesis were not mere allegories, but records of a forgotten age of giants and divine intervention. Imagine the implications. If these beings once walked the earth, would that not reinforce the reality of the Great Flood, the Watchers, and the supernatural battles described in the Bible? Would it not shatter the narrative that modern science and history have tried to construct? A world in which the supernatural is dismissed and faith is seen as outdated. Perhaps the Nephilim's survival is not just a mystery of history, but a test of faith, one that challenges us to open our eyes and recognize that the Bible's words are more than just ancient stories. They are truth. What do you think? Could the Nephilim have survived into the modern era, or are these reports merely legend? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries.